DevilNeverCry.
Well, what is up everybody? It is me, DevilNeverCry, and we are back with another video. Of course, today's video is going to be on Soulstice, an up-and-coming game set to release this year, I believe, by Italian game developers Modus Games. Now, the reason I'm covering this title is because a lot of people have been suggesting that I do, but also because the game has been touted as a DMC-esque game or a Bayonetta-esque game, which doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. Yes, DevilNeverCry has become synonymous with depth in games, but when you take a look at the games that have been slapped with this label, the similarities between them and DMC can at times be very few and far between. But I digress. We're going to go into the 10-minute footage that the developers recently showed off, where I believe the director was narrating through some of the features of the game. I'm going to give my thoughts on them and let you know whether or not I'm actually interested in this title. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. So the first thing that I really briefly want to touch upon before we delve into some of the combat is the UI, particularly one aspect of it, and that is the health bars. And I'm not sure why games don't ape this from DMC, but it's the enemy health bars which float suspiciously above an enemy's head, which look very janky and jarring and at odds with the game's UI, which at times just don't make sense to me. I think DMC perfected it. The reticle, the lock-on reticle of that I believe, is the health bar for enemies. The more you attack enemies and damage them, the more you degrade their health, the smaller the lock-on reticle gets, with it disappearing entirely of course because the enemy is dead. It makes sense. You can look at an enemy and at a glance immediately know what health they're at, and it just works. Having the health bar just float ominously above an enemy's head doesn't really make all too much sense, and at times can be intrusive because it can actually cover up other enemies or other enemy attacks, and so I'm not sure why games don't take that from DMC, but hey ho. Nitpicking aside, one of the first things that I realized is that this game has some subtle cell shading to it, which is pretty cool. You don't really see a lot of cell shaded games in this day and age, but I think it's cool that they've gone with that art style. One of the other things to briefly touch upon as well is that this game and the main protagonists, which are the two sisters by the way, are voiced by Stephanie Houston, which was quiet from Metal Gear Solid 5, who, as the name implies, was incredibly quiet, but that character was very well known for reasons that I won't dive into. So getting straight into the combat, the first thing I've noticed is that they've not gone with the DMC style ranking system when it comes to combat. Those of you know, when playing DevilNeverCry, the better you do, the higher your style rank is, with the ranking going through the alphabet, somehow culminating in the SSS rank. This game opts instead for the Bayonetta point system, where you start out with a base multiplier, which increases and improves depending on which specific attacks and combos that you throw out. However, this goes one step further and I believe is better than Bayonetta in a sense that the UI doesn't take up half the fucking screen, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure I'll intersperse a screen cap of Bayonetta here outlining the style point system, or the ranking system, sorry, where it can take up a large chunk of the screen and, as previously mentioned, block out vital information such as where an enemy is and whether or not it is attacking. This game does it in a far sleeker way. Of course, it is a little less transparent in that you only have small icons to dictate where your points came from, but once you know what those icons mean, I'm sure it'll be a breeze racking up points. And of course, just like every other combat system out there, once you take damage, that multiplier is then reset to its base level. Something else that I noticed during the combat is the ability to switch weapons, which no doubt is partially why this game has been touted as a character action hack and slash game. Now, in this day and age, switching weapons is standard for an action game, but something that caught my eye is that the character actually switched weapons mid-combo. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that maybe it will work like the DevilNeverCry reboot, where you'll have specific pauses in combos which will allow you to switch and end your combo with a different weapon. At least that is what I'm assuming. And whilst of course switching weapons mid-combo is great and having the ability to switch between weapons is cool, I really hope that they nail the cancelability of moves. And what I specifically mean by that is it's all well and good having these elaborate, sleek looking animations for specific attacks, but if you can't cancel out of them, there's no fucking point. And that's simply because you're not going to want to commit to the cool looking attacks because they are too much of a risk in a game that is touted as fast-paced and frenetic. It's just simply too much of a commitment and can lead to your combat actually feeling sluggish and unresponsive if you're locked in these incredibly lengthy animations. Of course, there has to be a balance. Even in DMC or Bayonetta, you can't immediately cancel out of every and any single attack you do, but as mentioned, there is a balance, and I'm hoping that the developers have found something similar. One of the other features that the developers touched upon is this idea of Unity and the Unity Gorge, or Gauge, however you want to pronounce it, which has its own story repercussions, of course, with the two sisters fighting in Unity, but also it seems to incentivize you to mix up your attacks and use specific attacks in Unity with each other. As you use these attacks in Unity and you synchronize your attacks flawlessly, you go up a level of Unity, with high levels of Unity providing different buffs to the protagonist. And the example that they used here was one of the sisters' attacks actually targeting multiple enemies if you have a high level of Unity, which I guess for efficiency standards makes sense, right? You want to not only rack up those points by using different attacks, but also picking specific attacks will provide you with a buff. And the last thing that I want to touch upon here, and hold on to your hats for this one because I'm sure you won't see this one coming, is the idea of a rapture state or rapture mode. As with most games touted as DMC-esque or Bayonetta-esque, they have a mode very similar to Devil Trigger or Climax mode, as it was called in Bayonetta 2, though I might be misremembering now that I think about it. But just like Devil Trigger, the protagonist is provided with more attack damage, faster attacks, and a wider area of effect for their attacks, with the hitbox being absolutely massive, allowing you to hit multiple enemies at once. But that ultimately is where the similarities with DevilNeverCry seemingly end. The game is touted as a fantasy story with fast-paced action, but boiling things down to their very core, it's an anime-esque protagonist with a massive fuck-off sword fighting waves of enemies, so what's not to like? And so, to round out the video, what is my opinion on Soulstice? Well, I'm interested in the game. I'm hoping we're able to get some sort of demo so that we can get hands-on with the game, because it's all well and good with your combat looking fast and flashy, but again, if it controls horribly, it's not going to be something that I'm going to be interested in. But fingers crossed, I'm holding out hope. I'll reserve judgment until we get more footage or a potential demo, but we'll just have to wait and see. Again, this game drops sometime in August or fall, but we haven't got a solid concrete date or even month yet. And with that, we come to the end of the video. If you enjoyed today's video, do be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing, as of course it all helps out the channel. You'll notice that the setup has changed somewhat. If you want me to make a video on what things are looking like at the moment, let me know down in the comments below. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.